What are empirical and true formulae, and how do we calculate them? Any formula, whether it's true or empirical, gives a particle ratio, a mole ratio of the elements which are inside it. For example, sulfuric acid, H2SO4, has a ratio 2 hydrogen atoms for every 1 sulfur atom for every 4 oxygen atoms, which is the same ratio as 2 moles hydrogen atoms is to 1 mole sulfur atoms is to 4 moles oxygen atoms. I'm not saying 2 hydrogen atoms are 2 moles hydrogen atoms. I'm saying this ratio 2 is to 1 is to 4 can apply when you're speaking atoms, or if you're speaking mole atoms, the ratio will be the same. But now the issue is that when a chemist gets a compound, finds it actually in real life, and brings it into his or her laboratory, the chemist doesn't have a way of counting the number of atoms of each kind inside that compound. The chemist can only measure things about the compound. For example, the mass of the amount of compound as a whole, and on combustion, the mass of each of the products. And from that, know the mass of the components. So the chemist can measure mass. And so the chemist can measure the mass ratio of the elements inside a compound. But now the problem is that mass ratio is not the same ratio as what is inside the formula, because the formula is a particle ratio, not a mass ratio. And so we need to go from the measured mass ratio to a calculated particle ratio so that we can get the formula. Now, when we do that in the simplest format, we end up with an empirical formula. The word empirical means measured. It's got to do with the direct measurements that the chemist makes. So a chemist measures the mass ratio of the different elements inside a compound, converts that to a particle ratio, and from that they get the empirical formula. And the empirical formula is also the simplest formula you can get. Then what about true formula? Once the chemist knows the true molar mass, he or she can compare that to the simplest molar mass that you get from the empirical formula, and from that comparison find out the factor by which they are different to get the true formula. Let's get some concrete examples to see how this works.